Good afternoon. I'm going to call the regular Parks and Recreation Commission meeting to order for Wednesday, March 23rd, 2011. Could we all rise for the pledge, please? Ready? Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Ms. McGill, would you call roll, please?
Chair Wiscombe.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
K-Spear.
Here.
Ferrara.
Here.
Longstreet.
Here.
Jacobson and intern Yee are not present.
Thank you, Ms. McGill. Okay, we are moving on to item number 1, which is election of the vice chair. Do you have anything to say, Ms. Rapp, on that? Or okay, recommendation is that the commission elect a vice chair to serve as presiding officer for the period of March 23rd through July 30th, 2011. And I would like to nominate Mr. Scott Burns to that position.
I will second it then.
Any discussion? Mr. Burns is willing, we hope.
I am willing.
Great. Okay. No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Carries unanimously. Congratulations. Or condolences, whatever.
Does the pay raise start next week?
That was just a dream you had.
Okay. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, we do not.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. Rapp. Written communications? No? Okay. Public comment. Do we have anyone here for public comment on any item that's not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing as that we do not have any public comment, we're going to close public comment and we will move on to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. We'll start with Ms. Longstreet.
I attended the Trails Management Workshop on March, I think it was the 4th. I just learned many useful things, and I will be taking them back to the Front Country Trails. But it was a very useful workshop.
Thank you very much. Mr. Burns?
No report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ferrara?
Yes, I'm on the IPM liaison to that committee. I was unable to make that meeting due to a conflicting schedule, but unfortunately we're going to have the report today from them, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Great. Okay, thank you. Mr. K-Spear, do you have anything?
Yes, I attended, since our last meeting, the Creeks Advisory Committee, and I serve as a liaison from Parks and Rec there. And
Chris, turn your mic on, please. Thanks.
yes, I attended the Creeks Advisory Council, and I also attended the dedication of the Mission Creek Restoration Project at Talent Road, and a good time was had by all, and it got a little wet. I also attended the Santa Barbara Youth Council had a poster contest, and this was done in coordination with Domestic Violence Solutions, and it was at the Faulkner Gallery, and the gallery was full of kids and parents, and it was truly a very special evening, and I hope our Youth Council representative will expand on that in her remarks later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. K-Spear. Okay, Ms. Jacobson isn't here, but she did submit a report, which I would like to read to you, please. And she says, I attended the annual meeting and celebration of the Trails Council on March 9th. There were about 60 people in attendance. They introduced board members and members who are active in the community. There will be a barbecue and hike at El Capitan Ranch, April 10th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Enjoy morning trail activities, day hikes, equestrian riding across the high ridges and upper Bill Wallace Trail, as well as mountain biking and trail runs following the 11-mile-long Bill Wallace Trail. In the afternoon, enjoy a sumptuous barbecue, then rock out to 2 hours of live music featuring Nate, Lotta, and the Train Hoppers. Individuals tickets are $20 or $30 at the barbecue, and families are $40 or $50 at the barbecue. Everyone is invited and encouraged to come. The president of Trails Council awarded individuals who have generously given to the Trails Council. Congressional recognition was given from Lois Capps, and a beautiful video presentation on springtime and flowers was given. Look forward to starting the Condor Trail project. Ms. Jacobson also said, I attended the Youth Council meeting on March 21st. There were 16 Youth Council in attendance. Oscar Flores gave a presentation on library youth services. Oscar went over the website and showed Youth Council the many ways they can access information. Teens do not need an ID to receive a library card. Teens are encouraged to get one. The website has a spot to blog where you can share reads or check out what others are reading. Go to the library website and click on Teen. Find resources for anything. You can also get downloadable e-books right from your smart device, and if they don't have e-book you want, just ask and they will get it for you. COYA, which is Coalition of Youth Advocates, is beginning a Stop Texting While Driving campaign. So far, 122 students have signed up and given a thumbprint. COYA has also gotten passed a no smoking at beaches and parks ordinance, as well as no tobacco reselling license within 100 feet of schools. And in Carpinteria, no smoking at all. Spark, and Spark is Students Pursuing Alternative Recreation in the Community. Planning, update, speak out, activities and entertainment, April 14th from 3 to 8 at Cabrillo Arts Center. Thank you and have an awesome meeting. So that's from Ms. Jacobson. Okay. And then my report, on March 3rd, I attended the regular Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting. Mr. Downey reported on enforcements. And one of the staff members requested a history of the setback tree code at the next regular meeting. So I think Mr. Downey's going to put that together. And then we went on to make site visits and review the trees that are on your agenda this evening. On March 4th, Ms. Rapp and I attended the Ealings Tennis Center grand opening, where the mayor lobbed a ball over the net to the Ealings Park Foundation chairman. And I'm just going to say we're fortunate to have this wonderful organization take over the tennis courts. It is bittersweet, but it's going to be a great fit for the Parks Department, and they're going to make the necessary improvements to the facility. So it was an exciting event. March 9th, I attended the regular Gulf Advisory Committee meeting, and the committee members heard a staff report which contained FY 2011 mid-year stats and FY 2012 strategies, and then possible fee changes for 2012. The committee gave input on these fee changes, and more analysis is being performed as the basis for discussion at another special Golf Course Advisory Committee meeting that's coming up in April. On March 10th, I attended the special Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting where the group continued the work on Upper State Street. Right now, they're in the process of selecting the appropriate trees for various conditions on Upper State Street, so that work will continue. March 21st, I also was at the Mission Creek Restoration and Fish Passage project at the Talent Road Bridge, and yes, it was wet, but it was fun. So great project to see. And I think Mr. Downey will probably talk about yesterday's activities with council. You planning on doing that? We did have another appeal meeting yesterday for a setback tree at 320 Cooper Road, and the appeal was denied by the council. And that concludes the commissioner committee assignment reports.
Chair Wiscombe?
Yes, Ms. Rapp.
If I could just add, because I know that one of the local televisions actually had the information incorrect
Yes.
on their broadcast. So just to add to that the council denied the appeal and upheld the decision of the Street Tree Advisory Committee and the Park and Recreation Commission to deny the removal of the tree. So I know it gets confusing sometimes for people in really understanding exactly what the outcome was. So I just wanted to add that to be clear.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay, we are moving on. Do we have any commission and staff communications, Ms. Rapp?
Just a couple of events that are coming up that I wanted to let the commission know so you could put it on your calendar. Earth Day, which is a major community event, is a very big involvement by city staff, many departments, including us, and we will have information booths at Earth Day. That's April 16th and 17th in Alameda Park. And this year's theme is Powered by the People, very appropriate for a festival which is focused on sustainability. So this is a very big event for us. We look forward to having a lot of information to provide people on our programs. So that is coming up. And I also wanted to let you know that some of you have attended or at least heard about the event that we do, not every year because we aren't able to secure the funding, but the 90th birthday event. And this is an event that the department works with donors and sponsors to celebrate the people in our community that are 90 years of age or older. And so we are currently working on having an afternoon tea dance and ice cream social in the new Carrillo Recreation Center ballroom. And so tentatively the date is set for Thursday, May 19th. This will be the first major event in that facility. So we are, staff are just moving into the building. We are starting to operate our programs out of there. We will be doing a big grand opening, but probably in June or July. So that's the status on that. So if you get a chance, walk through. It really is gorgeous. We're still working with a committee of some local historians and the Pearl Chase Society and others to get some historic art enlargements on canvas of photos from the use of the building over the decades, and how we really want the art to reflect how the community has enjoyed the Carrillo Recreation Center over the many years. And so we're choosing the photographs and determining where that will go, and that will be the art in the facility. So a lot of work taking place on that, working towards the grand opening.
Great.
Date?
For the Carrillo, for the grand opening?
Yes.
We have not
no,
set it yet.
the
For
birthday.
the birthday, it's Thursday, May 19th in the afternoon from 2 to 4. So that's what we're working on right now. So
Has Jerry Harwin been invited?
I am sure that staff are working with him and Larry Crandell and others. So this is a big
Need
event.
some help there.
Oh, I'm writing that down. Thank you, Chris. Scott is involved as well on the planning end.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Rapp. Okay. Mr. Yee, our youth intern, is not here today, but we do have a very special guest, Blanca Garcia from the Youth Council, who's going to give the Youth Council report. Welcome, Ms. Garcia. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So, I'm Blanca Garcia from Youth Council, and I'll be giving the report for Michael Yee. So currently, Youth Council teamed up with other leaders such as Friday Night Live, Ivy Teen Center, KOIA, and other teen organizations to present the Spark Youth event. And Spark stands for Students Pursuing Alternative Recreational Activities in Our Community. It'll be our second youth speak out, and it will be an evening of motivational speakers, entertainment, photo booth, and other activities to share with teens and adults for alternatives to risky behaviors such as drugs and alcohol. And the event will be held April 14th at the Cabrillo Arts Pavilion, and to kick off the Free for the Weekend. And we hope to see you all there. You're all more than welcome. We're also currently doing a fundraiser called 100-100, where the Youth Council tries to raise $100 in 100 days, where each member tries to raise $100 in 100 days. So we're working on that, and we're planning to use that to help with cost for speak outs and other Youth Council events and activities. We also recently participated in a local youth conference sponsored by Just Communities, which talked about, which advocated youth discrimination towards youth and ageism. And we're also recruiting members for next year because a lot of our seniors will be leaving. So we'll be accepting applications. So if you guys have any recommendations, you should talk to teens and tell them that we're looking for members. And we also had a presentation, our last meeting, about the library's website and a lot of resources that it has for teens and how we teens can acquire library cards without an ID. So we should all take advantage of that as teens. And we also recently partnered with Domestic Violence for the poster contest, and that went great. And the winner received T-shirts with their poster on them. And we did that because domestic violence is a big problem in Santa Barbara. So we really wanted to make everyone more aware of the problem. So.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia. The youth speak out on April 14th. What is the time for that? Do you have a time on that?
I believe
5 to 8.
5 to 8.
5 to 8.
Okay, great. And how does one contribute to the $100 in 100 days?
Let's see. Well, I know that each member is trying to raise $100 in 100 days. So you could donate to any member of the Youth Council. So.
Okay.
And the check is made out to the Park Foundation, and in the memo section of the check, if you would write Youth Council, and so thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, so we will gladly take donations if you guys.
That's great.
would like
great
to.
program. Good. Anyone have any comments? Okay. Thank you very much for coming. It was a great report. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to move on to the consent calendar. Summary of council actions. Ms. Rapp, did you want to go over that, or it's in our packet? So
It's in your packet. It basically was 2 large grants, applying for grants related to Creeks projects, and so there's just information on that, and you already briefed on the appeal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 3 is approval of minutes. We have 2 minutes, the special meeting on February 22nd and the regular meeting on February 23rd, 2011. Does anyone have a need to take those separately?
No, I just would move for approval of February 22nd and February 23rd minutes.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay. We are moving on to agenda item number 4, which is the Street Tree Advisory Committee items. But I do want to welcome Councilmember House. Appreciate your coming. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Downey, oh, you're up here already. Great. Okay. Item 4A1, which is 1533 San Miguel Avenue. I'm just going to preface the introduction to this item by saying that any action of the Parks and Recreation Commission made pursuant to the Municipal Code, Chapter 1524, Preservation of Trees, may be appealed to the City Council within 10 days. Okay, so we're on to 1533 San Miguel. We do have one speaker, so we will hear Mr. Downey's report, and then any questions from the commission, and then we'll open it up for public comment.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, 1533 San Miguel Avenue is Indian snake root tree. New tree to me. I don't know much about it, but this particular tree is being requested for removal due to a lot split for the property. The lot split would require a separate driveway for the second lot, and the root pruning necessary to install that second driveway would destabilize this tree. The Street Tree Advisory Committee reviewed this tree and made a recommendation that the tree be approved, but the driveway installation wait until such time as the building is approved. It turns out, after checking with community development staff, that in order to record the lot split, the driveway is necessary. So therefore, staff recommends that the tree be approved on the condition that 2 24-inch box street trees be replace this tree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. Does anyone on the commission have a question? Mr. Downey? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Downey, what are the designated street trees for that street? Are the, which one is that? The normal designated street tree?
Chair Wiscombe.
Is it the evergreen tree?
It's the evergreen pear tree, yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, no more questions, so we're going to open it up to public comment. We have one speaker slip. Ms. Foley, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jessica Kinahan Foley. I'm here representing the property owners at 1533 San Miguel. Jennifer and William Brummett. Jennifer's here today in the audience if you have questions. It's nice to see you from the faces that I haven't seen in quite some time.
Ms. Foley,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I forgot to turn your mic on.
Oh, no problem.
I've done that before, and I really
problem.
apologize. Would you mind?
Restating? Certainly.
Yes, thank you.
My name
I'm
is
very
Jessica
sorry.
Kinahan Foley. I'm here representing the property owners of 1533 San Miguel Avenue, who are Jennifer and William Brummett. Jennifer's in the audience today, if you have any questions of the owners. First of all, I would like to thank staff for their help with this project. We found ourselves in a certain unique circumstance, I think, because the Street Tree Advisory Committee recognized the need to remove the tree, and we appreciate that acknowledgement. Unfortunately, and I do appreciate where they're coming from, they would like to see the tree remain as long as possible. Unfortunately, in order to accomplish the lot split, which incidentally is, I did want to point out, it is consistent with the zoning ordinance and general plan for this area. So we're implementing a lot split that is consistent with the base zoning. The issue is that in order to record the lot split, we do have to install the improvements associated with that. And I'd be happy, I brought a copy of the DART letter from Community Development, but specifically they state that this proposed subdivision will be considered an A-track, meaning some demolition construction work will need to be permitted before the map can record. Skipping over some of the other incidentals in there, specifically they call out constructing a new driveway approach to new access. So in order to do that, we have to remove the tree. The owners are happy to install the trees recommended by the Street Tree Advisory Committee as noted by staff. So we hope that you support staff recommendation and are happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Foley. Appreciate your coming. Okay, I will open it up for discussion.
I don't have anything to discuss. I'm ready to accept the recommendation of staff that the tree be approved for removal and replaced with 224-inch box designated street trees.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We're moving on to item 4B1, which is 319 West Valerio Street. Mr. Downey?
Chair, Westcomb and Commissioners, 319 West Valerio Street is a fairly small in consideration for the eventual size of this tree, Italian stone pine. It is located at the front edge of the property, adjacent to a fence and within a foot or two of the sidewalk. The applicant is requesting approval for removal based on a requirement that he repair the public sidewalk due to the damage this tree has caused. In addition to that, it's caused a number of other damages to the fence, some irrigation, and it's rather a large tree for the small lot. The Street Advisory Committee reviewed those items and determined, due to the proximity to the sidewalk and the eventual size of this tree, it would extremely overwhelm the property, and recommend that it be approved on the condition that a tree of potential 25 feet spread and height replace it.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Downey? Okay. Oh, Mr. Burns, yes.
Is there any discussion of what sort of tree the replacement tree will be, or is that kind of up in the air?
Chair Westcomb and Commissioner Burns, the applicant does indicate they would be willing to replace it with another tree. If that was the desire of this commission, staff will be happy to work with them to come to a decision about that tree, but there's no recommendation as to which species.
Okay. Any other? Mr. Ferrari, yes.
Yes, Mr. Downey, what is the length of time? It's kind of a question to educate myself too, but what is the length of time that an applicant has and the staff gives them to be able to put in another tree? What is it with a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year?
Chair Westcomb and Commissioner Ferrara, Parks Division tree permits are valid for 60 days, so they would have to complete the removal and the replacement within that 60 days.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay. Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditional removal of the tree without us really worrying about what the new replacement tree will be at the at 319 West Valerio. Concur with staff and the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
I just want to clarify that. Are you, staff wanted it to have a height and spread of 25 feet. Is that part of your motion?
Yes, yes it is, but not that it's not the particular species.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Sorry.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Aye. Great. Okay, that carries unanimously. Moving on to 4B2, 1250 Farello Road. Mr. Downey?
Chair Westcomb and Commissioners, the tree at 1250 Farello Road is a Chinese elm that has been topped for view reasons and part of it for Edison clearance. The new owners of the property are trying to improve the property and desire to remove this tree and replace it with some citrus trees. The Street Tree Advisory Committee reviewed this tree and determined that the suggested replacements of the applicant wouldn't provide shade for the property in the afternoon from the afternoon sun, and a canopy tree would also help hide the pole and wires, and they recommend approval on the condition it's replaced with a canopy tree. Staff has determined it would be appropriate to replace with the citrus trees and supports the citrus tree replacement. That's the recommendations on this one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey.
I would just like to say that I support edible, the replacement with something that is edible. I think that's a sustainability aspect, and if the applicant is willing to maintain those trees, and that is a benefit to them.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and I think that the applicant has demonstrated in a pretty thorough package, what their intent with the landscape is, and that they have a design worked out. So I would also concur with staff's recommendation on this one. Anyone else?
I would make a motion that we concur with the removal of the setback tree at 1250 Farello Road to be replaced with trees of the applicant's choice. Is that? Yeah.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Okay, we are moving on to 4C1, which is 200 East Constance Avenue. Mr. Downey?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, the tree in question is a green wattle acacia. It's rather confusing as to which one it is, so I'll attempt to use the mouse to point to the tree in question. This is the trunk and the main tree. There are a couple of smaller trees here and one behind this tree that they're not requesting removal. The Street Advisory Committee visited the site and reviewed the tree. The tree in question had lost a branch sometime in the fairly recent past, and there are some mushrooms at the base of this tree, which indicates some decay within the tree. It does not indicate any destabilization of this tree. However, the proposal of the applicant is to remove this tree and keep the second tree, which you cannot see in this view, to fill in that space. When we visited the site, we determined that the second tree that they wanted to preserve is actually leaning on this tree and is less stable than this tree is. We determined that through some pruning, corrective pruning, and thinning of this existing tree and removal of the tree that they had wanted to preserve, there would be more light in the area, and a small oak would have an opportunity to develop and would keep this tree in a acceptable condition until that oak tree had a chance to grow up, and would be appropriate to remove this tree at a later date. The recommendation is to deny the request to remove this tree.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Questions?
Were you able to have a discussion with the homeowner regarding the recommendations you made today?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Longstreet, I've made a couple of calls to this applicant. I have not received return phone calls. However, this street tree report and the agenda has been mailed to the applicant. They do have the information of what is being recommended.
And if we deny this removal, would they then have to reapply for the other tree, or because of its unsafe status of leaning and things, can you administratively issue a permit for that?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Longstreet, the tree that Street Advisory Committee staff is recommending be removed could be approved administratively because of its safety aspect.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I live in that neighborhood, and I walked by that tree, and I honestly didn't realize it was 2 trees until I got the report. But my concern is that the homeowner asked for one thing, we're going to give him something else, and it doesn't sound like, and maybe he's out of town. Maybe he doesn't know what we're planning on doing. I'd be interested in actually postponing this for a month to make sure that get the homeowners approval. But I'm willing to go with whatever way the commission goes.
Okay, Mr. Ferrara, yes.
Yes, I would agree with Commissioner Burns. I think that giving the owner that notice and making sure that they have that of the plan would be make a lot of sense to me. Makes sense to me.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, that would address my concern, because that's why I asked about the administrative removal, is because then that would save the applicant the inconvenience or this extra step of having to reapply and come through this commission again. So
And the expense.
does that serve that purpose then, Mr. Downey?
Chairwoman Commissioner Longstreet, I'd like to share with you the process by which we notify people of what's going on. We've established a policy that when we receive an application and it's placed on a agenda for the Street Tree Advisory Committee, we're making contact with the people to advise them of when that meeting is and where that meeting is. And then subsequently, when the Street Tree Advisory Committee makes a recommendation, this street tree report and the agenda is sent to the people, advising them that the item is on the agenda for this commission. In addition to that, the tree is posted with a notice that is being considered. So that is our process for notifying the public. And Ms. Longstreet, if you could repeat your question. I'm sorry, I've lost your question.
Well, just if we postponed it, would there be a benefit, or would our denial kind of handle the same thing in that you could then administratively approve the removal of that second tree, which is the issue tree? What I see is we're not privy to the fact that this applicant had any professional advice before requesting this. They have now been given a great deal of professional advice by the Street Tree Advisory Committee's site visit. So, are we going to do anything different in a month? Or would this just sort of move it along in the sense that when staff gets to them, they have an option that is approvable by our staff? See what I mean? It just kind of cuts out a middle.
Chair
waiting a
Wiscombe
month.
and Commissioner Longstreet. So if I'm understanding the situation, if the commission is supporting the recommendation of the Street Tree Advisory Committee to deny the removal of the particular tree that is addressed on the application, you can take that action tonight. You can also add a condition, that would authorize to work with the city arborist for an administrative approval on removal of the other tree that is leaning. And I'm not sure what the additional time gives you. So I just, in the interest of moving things forward, we're happy to follow up and continue to try and reach the applicant so that we can share in more detail what the recommendations were from the Street Tree Advisory Committee. But if your recommendation on removal is not going to change, then I would encourage you to go forward with your action, but allow the opportunity for them to do the second removal if they so choose to, administratively.
Okay. I Thank you, Ms. Rupp, for that. I just have, I think, two questions of Mr. Downey. We met on March 3rd, regular stack meeting. How soon after that meeting do you actually notify the applicant that, this is what stack had recommended?
Chair Wiscombe, in this particular case, I made a phone call the very next week.
Okay.
That phone call has not been returned. Once the agenda is established for this meeting, that is the time that I send written notification.
Okay, so that was a week ago, and you made a phone call basically 2 weeks ago on this particular tree. Okay. My next question is it if the commission does vote to deny removal of this tree, and you are in a position to administratively approve the other tree, does the applicant have to apply and pay the fee? Do we have, as a body, I don't know the answer to this, do we as a body have a right to say, in this particular case, we would waive the fee for the second application? I know that's...
Chair Wiscombe, I think your question is a valid one. I think that's the same direction that Commissioner Longstreet was going with her question. And I would say, yes, I think that it's all part of this one action, and so that would be entirely appropriate.
Okay, because that to me seems like the fair thing to do.
And I will make a motion that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory recommendation and have staff work with the applicant to complete the recommendations in the STAC committee comments.
Okay, with no additional cost to the owner to apply for the second tree. Okay, so I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what you were saying. Okay. Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Just one for educational purposes. You mentioned something about mushrooms on a tree, and you said, my question is, when does that cause problems for trees?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Burns, one of the signs that there's decay inside the tree is the presence of mushrooms. The presence of mushrooms by itself is not an indicator that the tree is a hazard. It just indicates that there's some decay inside the tree. It's one of the tools you use to assess the depth of the problem. In this case, in assessing this tree, I determined there was not enough indicators to make a determination that the tree is an immediate hazard.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. No other discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, carries unanimously. Thank you. Last item is 4C2, 210 Balboa Drive. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, 210 Balboa Drive is another Italian stone pine. The applicant received a notice a while back to make repairs to the sidewalk as a result of his private tree. I will point out the differences between this one and the previous one at West Valerio. This tree is located much farther away from the sidewalk, and through alternate construction techniques of the sidewalk, varying the sidewalk away from the tree, we can even allow more room away from the tree, and root pruning can occur in a much safer manner than the other tree could have been. There is still some concern that the required root pruning may destabilize this tree. However, that's a construction time decision that I can make administratively. The committee recommends that this application be denied and asks that the applicant work with staff to evaluate the tree once the construction site is open.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Downey. Is there anyone have questions for Mr. Downey? Or?
I do have a question.
Yes, Mr. Farrar?
I hope I'm not opening up a can of worms here. But my question concerns this. When the city asks somebody or denies a removal of a tree, and that tree were to then create future damage to sidewalks, to utility lines, to adjacent properties, who pays the tab? I mean, if I were in a situation like that, I would wonder, you know, I tried to get this tree taken out, but that was denied. Now there's damage occurring because of this tree. It's pretty, I guess I want some clarification on that. Who picks up the tab at that point?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, this tree is a part of the property for that person. Just like any other portion of the house, anything that happens as a result of this tree, it's ultimately their responsibility for the damage that occurs. So just because the Park Commission might deny a tree removal does not preclude them from providing future maintenance as any future damage to this tree occurs. They would be responsible for any damage that their property caused.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Farrar, if I could add a bit, I think that your question is a good one. In fact, this was the heart of the discussion at City Council yesterday when they were considering the appeal of 320 Cooper Street. And I guess the broader picture is that years ago, the city adopted a tree ordinance to protect setback trees with the overriding intention to protect and manage to some degree the canopy of the urban forest, the health of the urban forest, and wanting to see some discretion in how setback trees were planted and maintained. And that's the overriding picture of why the Park and Recreation Commission addresses setback trees, which are indeed private property. And the issue that is being discussed a lot is it's private property, and the owner is responsible for what happens on their property. The owner is responsible in this case for damage that the tree causes, etc. But the ordinances adopted by City Council were with that goal and objective in mind. And so those are the ordinances that we govern by. So, but it is the discussion that is taking place, and I think it's appropriate to have some consideration of the private property owners' concerns and issues. It is their property, and many of us are property owners, so we can understand that. But the bigger picture and the reason why the city put the ordinance in place was for the betterment of the entire community. So some may question how the ordinance is structured currently, but that's currently what we have. So it is a good discussion, and clearly different opinions. So does that help?
I think it addresses it, and I'll leave it at that right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think it's a good discussion to have. And I think that's why we've had 2 of those discussions at the city council level.
I also think it's worthy to note that, and Mr. Downey did refer to this, that the notice to repair is dated November 2nd, 2005. So, and we're in 2011. So, just as a comment, and I think to look at the broader picture of this, that's important to note. Yes, Ms. Longstreet?
Well, I'd make a motion that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation to deny this removal of the setback tree at 210 Balboa Drive.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Oh, aye.
Well, I was just going to say nay, but I was going to say why, but that's okay. I'll just say nay. That's okay.
Okay. So it carries 4-1. Okay. Great. That concludes street trees on our agenda. Thank you, Mr. Downey. We're moving on to new business, and Mr. Escobar is here with an integrated pest management 2010 annual report. The recommendation is that the Commission accept the Integrated Pest Management 2010 Annual Report and recommend that the report be forwarded to City Council. Welcome, Mr. Escobar.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Wisco and Commissioners. I'm Santos Escobar, City Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department Parks Manager and also the City's IPM Coordinator. Before I start, I would like to go through and just thank our Citizens IPM Advisory Committee of Greg Chittick, Oscar Carmona, Corey Wells, and Kristen Labonte for all their hard work working with staff. I'd also like to thank our department IPM coordinators as well, Mr. Jim Dewey with Public Works, Mr. Jeff McKee with the airport, Mr. Judd Conley with the waterfront, Joe Poirier with the fire department, Sue Gray with community development as well. And lastly, I'd also like to thank our park supervisors for all their hard work helping to prepare this report, Mr. Ken Brown, Steve Takaya, Mark Roush, and our other staff. A lot of work goes into these reports. So a big thank you goes out to all these good people. So today's report is our 2010 annual report. It's actually our 7th report, believe it or not. So we've been at it for quite some time. Integrated Pest Management is or also known as IPM, is an effective environmentally sensitive decision-making system of pest management. And our goal is always to minimize health, environmental, and financial risk. Just as a quick background of how we got to our integrated pest management strategies and policies within our city. The city has always been committed to protecting resources for future generations. In 2003, the IPM policy was adopted by Council. In 2004, the IPM strategy was adopted as well, and it required the development of a zone system for the IPM's implementation. And in 2005, Council directed staff to develop what is known as the FAIR Zone model, or the Pesticide Hazard and Exposure Reduction model. And in 2006, Council adopted the FAIR Zone model, which maps out parks, facilities, and properties within the city. The IPM strategy promotes the use of non-hazardous and reduced risk alternatives that are protective of human health and the environment, and also reduces and eliminates the use of pesticide products that pose known, likely, or probable human health or environmental risk. When we were going through the list of materials that we used, we actually went ahead and eliminated 39 materials. The pesticide hazard and exposure reduction model, also known as FAIR, assigns green, yellow, and special circumstances or red zones, and allows the use of carefully screened materials by zone designations. City parks, just so everybody realizes, we're 98% green, or a total of 1,450 acres that we manage as green. We also manage 2% of our park system, or 26 acres of yellow. An example of a green park would be Alice Keck Memorial Garden. An example of a partially yellow park, or also sometimes known as a mixed zone park because it's yellow and green, is the Mission Rose Garden and the Mission Ruins. And as you can tell down below, we have our rose garden where we maintain over 1,700 rose bushes, and occasionally we do have to go through and use yellow materials in order to control diseases and pests. In the upper portion of this slide, you'll notice that we have the Mission Ruins, which is a historical site, and within the sandstone structure there, from time to time, we do get weeds and such, and it's always best not to go through and use any mechanical means to destroy and ruin this structure, so we'll go through and have to use other materials that are yellow. Citywide highlights. The total units of pesticides applied increased from 2,369 in 09 to 3,983. And those increases are primarily due to mosquitoes, that we had to go through and control mosquitoes at the bird refuge, mosquitoes at the Goleta Slough. Units of green material increased from 560 to 2,061 units. That big jump there is using green materials, also known as BTI, to control, once again, mosquitoes at the bird refuge in the Goleta Slough. The units of yellow materials increased from 1,134 to 1,633 units. The units of red material decreased from 676 to 289. That was primarily due at the airport because we didn't have to use any Viking to go through and control termites in the wooden structures at the airport. The number of pesticides were applied decreased from 211 in 09 to 186 in 2010. And here you can see a graph of the changes, as we're all aware that pesticide use is dynamic and it changes from year to year due to many variables that change within the environment. So you can see how we've gone through and we're using a lot of green, minimal yellow, and very little red now. The airport department highlights. The units of pesticides applied increased from 2,262 in 09 to 2,979 in 2010. The units of green materials increased from 517 to 1,169. And once again, that was due to mosquito abatement. Units of yellow material increased from 1,121 to 1,531. And the units of red material decreased from 623 to 279. And the units of red material being used at the airport are on the airstrips in order to control varmints. The airport spent 2,374 hours performing alternative pest management practices. And here's the graph for the airport from 04 to 2010. The Golf Division highlights. Units of pesticides applied decreased from 55 in 09 to 17 in 2010. The units of green material increased from 0 to 0.25. The units of yellow material increased from 3 to 6. And the units of red material decreased from 52 to 10. Those units of red material naturally are being used on golf greens. And our golf manager, Mr. Mark Reed, also goes through and applies compost tea to the greens, and he's been able to reduce materials here at the golf course. Also, 3,000 yards of mulch was spread on the golf course, and that was primarily due to the retention basin project at the golf course. So we're continuing to do good work there. And this is 2002 to 2010, and you can tell that in 2002 to 2003, a lot of red material was used. We had a lot of issues there. And once again, some of this is weather related as well. You can recall that we've had many days in summer months that you get lots of fog, and when you have greens that actually are $30,000 to $40,000 to repair if they go south, we go through and use red material at times, but we also go through and use old school practices that Mr. Mark Reed has been practicing and doing a great job on.
Mr. Escobar, could you just explain, because you've talked about the red, yellow, and green, but you also have two different colors of blue, and you have pink and red. Can you just talk about what
Correct.
those colors
I can go through and do that. In regards to the dark red is actually gallons of materials that are used, and the pink is actually pounds, and the blue in 2002 to 2004, that was a tiered system units that we would use, and those were in that day, those were the tiered system that we used, and those were the colors to specify that that was a material that was of high use and high exposure.
And Mr. Escobar, what is a unit when in reference to red units, green units?
A unit would be a pound, or a unit would be a gallon. Thank you. The Parks Division highlights overall the units of pesticides decreased from 19 in 09 to 8 in 2010. The units of green material decreased from 10 to 2. The units of yellow materials decreased from 9 to 6. No red materials were applied on any parkland. 870 yards of mulch was spread. We went through and decreased our material use because facilities working with San Aparicio and Vector Control, they ended up using materials at the bird refuge to control mosquitoes, and that's the reason why some of these material uses are lower than last year. And here's our use, and you can tell we've reduced significantly. Public Works Department highlights the units of pesticides applied increased from 34 units in 09 to 980 units in 2010. Units of green materials increased from 32 to 890. Units of yellow material increased from 1 to 90. No red materials were applied. Once again, the increase was due to mosquito abatement. Also, Public Works continues to use heat treatments in order to control termites in public buildings. Also, Public Works continues to go through on State Street and Coast Village Road to trap mice and rats. And here's the graph showing materials used for Public Works. On March 8, 2010, the Citizens IPM Advisory Committee voted unanimously to approve the IPM's 2010 annual report. And tonight I would appreciate your recommendation that the City Council accept the Integrated Pest Management 2010 annual report and continue to move this forward. And here's some park staff doing some IPM work in our park system. Grinding some tree stump, doing some weed whipping. We do a lot of that, as you're well aware. On the left, going through and using our propane tank to control weeds. And around this tree here, we're going through and burning a circle so we're not girdling the tree with a weed whip. And in the upper right, going through and doing some curb appeal. So I'm open for questions. I do have with me today Mr. Jeff McKee with the airport, Mr. Mark Reed with the golf course, and Mr. Senan Aparicio with Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Escobar.
Thank you.
I want to just say thank you to you, too, because I know you're the lead on this, and you thanked everyone else, but you deserve a big round of applause, too, for this. This is a great, great report. So thank you from the Commission, very definitely. I know I have a couple questions, but I'll open it up to the Commission for questions. Ms. Longstreet?
Mine's not a question so much as a comment to just thank everybody for, I know it takes a lot of hard work, and with budget cutbacks and all, the loss of the green team that we had in parks has had a great impact on the workload and what's able to be done. But I do appreciate the commitment people have shown to continuing this work with less staff and resources. So thank you.
Mr. Burns, did you have something?
Yeah,
No?
I've got a couple of,
Okay.
I wasn't
Good.
sure which direction.
Well,
A couple of questions. Is there any particular reason why we do this on an annual basis instead of a fiscal year basis?
We do this because it's part of our IPM strategy in regards to how we're supposed to report. That's the reason why we're doing it the way we do it, Commissioner.
Okay, good. The other question I have on the report, there was a comment that there was a firm at the waterfront that was being paid like $16 each to kill rodents, and then we had in the report it also showed that we spent 1,300 hours killing 1,650 rodents on State Street and Coast Village Road, and I'm just wondering if there's any way to figure out what that was costing us on a per rodent basis. And it seems funny, but the question is, if we're paying more than $16 each and letting another firm do it, why don't we look at letting someone else look at it, do it for us? You see I'm just trying to put some financial numbers into this report.
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Burns, in regards to the report, you are correct. There are two firms that actually do maintenance for our city. Currently, right now, we have one that does maintenance at the waterfront, and we also have one that does maintenance on State Street and Coast Village Road. And at the waterfront, the cost per rat is $15.60, and the cost for doing abatement on State Street and Coast Village Road is $15.14. So it's very competitive in regards to what the cost is. But I just want you to realize as well, it's sometimes very difficult to judge apples with apples when you're doing this type of work. And primarily, you need to look at the contract, and every individual writes a contract completely different. And that part I don't know because I haven't seen the contract in regards to how waterfront is contracted out versus public works. I do know that on State Street, though, if you go out there on the morning, you'll notice that the contractor is out there, and they are out there 5 days a week going through and looking at every trap that is actually numbered numerically so we can get these numbers. And the same thing can be said with the waterfront. It's numerical, and they're able to go through and take care of business that way. And they also listen to staff and also public inquiry in regards to when people see things, we can go through and actually move these traps to where the need is greatest.
Thank you. I've got another question which has more to do with the airport and the mosquitoes at the airport. My basic question is that paid by the passenger fees? How does that funding source work?
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Burns, I'm Jeff McKee, the maintenance superintendent from the airport. Most of airport is a enterprise fund, and most of our income comes from commercial industrial leases and from concession revenue. The fees that are charged directly to the passengers is a passenger facility charge, and it goes to capital projects. So the mosquito abatement is funded from our operation budget, which is about $13 million a year.
It's $13
million a year.
I guess my question then is, we're using green materials at the Goleta Slough at the airport, mostly using green materials so that they don't get into contact with the general public. And I may be wrong here, but the Goleta Slough and the airport runway really isn't where we have the general public wandering around. So, and the IPM committee on another matter classified something that was called normally yellow and called it green because on the last page of the report. And is there a way we might be able to classify the airport area that they could use yellow material instead of green material? Because I think that would be saving us money, and I'm not sure if that makes any sense.
We did actually do that, Chair Whitcomb, Commissioner Burns. We did actually do that when we originally mapped the area at the airport. Much of the area inside the airfield fence, which is inside the chain link and barbed wire, where the public doesn't typically walk, is mapped. Much of that is yellow, and we do use a combination of yellow materials and green materials, as well as red materials on the airfield to control rodents and mosquitoes.
I believe the green material has a shelf life or a life of 14 days, and the yellow is 6 months?
That's correct. Basically, I think 10 days for the green material and up to 6 months for the yellow material. The reason that we're trying to go to a less toxic approach as much as we can, so wherever the Mosquito and Vector Control District can use and thinks the green materials will be effective, they use those. And then in the areas where they're not able to access or where there's going to be an ongoing problem, they use the yellow materials. And we had to treat twice last year, so that's why you saw the numbers basically double for the year.
I guess my comment or question is, what's the price differential between the yellow and the green? I mean, was it that big of a difference that would make a big difference if we just went all to yellow?
I don't have specifics on the cost with me today, but the green material is actually much cheaper by the pound, but the cost is in the labor costs, and it's such a large area, and having to go out and treat repeatedly with the yellow material, where the labor costs are much lower for the long-lasting yellow material. We can apply it once or twice during the year.
Thank you.
Mr. Farrar?
Yes. Thank you. Like anything else, I'm sure all these pesticides, whether green, yellow, red, whatever color they are systemic. They will go throughout the entire system that they're come in contact with, I guess, within a certain radius or something. Would that be a correct assumption to begin with?
Chair Riscom, Commissioner Farrar, in regards to being systemic, that wouldn't be a correct assumption because the green materials, they are food-grade materials that you could actually eat. And many of the materials also are non-exempt materials that don't even fit the criteria for when they're being labeled and processed. So they don't have any precautionary warnings on the material that's being used. Mm-hmm. In regards to yellow materials, some of them may be systemic, some of them may not be.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm getting at. If you have a material that is systemic, we have, and we're using it at the airport, which would be yellow or red or one of those colors there. My concern is that we're not only protecting humans, but sensitive habitat too. And just down, if you keep going down to the ocean from the airport and everything seems to travel downhill, we have a very sensitive area down there in the refuge, if it's not a refuge, but where the birds live, the different, species that need to be protected, I think, down there too. So my concern is if we went with yellow, or, which I know we don't do red, I haven't seen that, but possibly yellow, that might impact, if it's systemic, if it could reach that far down to that sensitive area. That's where my concern lies. So I'm more than happy with green. Yeah.
The yellowy material we use is Alticid XR, and it specifically targets the mosquito larva from changing from the larval stage into the adult stage. So it's very targeted. It is a yellow material. And that slough area on the airport is also a critical habitat area, so we're mindful of what we use in that area.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Casepier's going to take a break, so let me move on with. I have some comments and some questions, so I'll just start. Mr. McKee, since you're up there, there was a section on alternative pest control and I guess mainly weeding in the native habitat restoration areas. And do you expect this to decrease again in the upcoming year? I know it's decreased for this year, but...
Chair Wiscombe. Yes, this year it decreased dramatically. We've had a large restoration project that is kind of taking hold, that requires less mitigation, less direct hand weeding at this point, but we did do another area this year, so we may see an increase next year for maintaining that new area that we have recently completed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I know Mr. Reed is here, and the Gulf Division, this is a comment, decreased their use in 2010, and I just want to commend them for you implemented alternative practices for disease and pest control, and I thought it was interesting that you're increasing the bent grass population, which is less weeds, less irrigation, and uses less fertilizer. So you want to say something, Mark?
Commissioner Wiscombe, members of the Parks and Rec Commission, just like to say thank you. And when I started 3 years ago, that was the primary goal, to improve on the IPM, what was implemented years before I started, and to install a turf grass that's, like you said, more drought tolerant, more disease resistant, and now we're starting to reap the benefits. And it also has a lot to do with our staff and their hard work and buying into what I'm selling.
Great. Well, it really shows in your numbers. I think it's really good. I was pretty shocked to see that, considering how green it is and how great it is. So you would expect more use of pesticides, but no. Thank you very much for that. That's great. And I guess let's see, Mr. Escobar. This is pretty minor, but okay. All units of applied pesticides decreased in the Parks Department, while citywide the units increased. And I'm not sure about the red, but I know green and yellow did. And it was in the report that the green declined because the mosquito control was turned over to environmental services. Is that correct?
The work at the bird refuge ended up turning over to facility maintenance, which is overseeing the vector control at the bird refuge, and they have worked with the county vector control in order to control the mosquitoes, and they go through and they monitor monthly in regards to targeting the mosquito and use special CO2 containers to count the actual mosquitoes and also to find out whether or not there is West Nile virus at the bird refuge and also at the Goleta Slough. And at the bird refuge, there's not been any findings of the West Nile virus. At the Goleta Slough, there has been. So it's monitored very closely.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then how do you account for the decline in the yellow in the Parks Department? I know that number also declined.
The decline in the yellow has to do primarily due to the green team in years past in regards to all the mulching that we've been doing, and we've been able to reduce it. But like I stated earlier, the use of materials is dynamic and can change from year to year, and now with all the rains that we're receiving, we're going to definitely have a bountiful crop of weeds again, and next year the number could be a lot higher.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I went through this report, and I picked out some statistics that I really just looked at some things different way. I know you always tell me this is, I analyze things, but I think they're pretty interesting, and I just kind of want to go through them based on my other comments. And that's parks spent 88% of their tracked hours, now we're talking about tracked hours, using non-chemical practices on weeds. That's 2,842 hours in 2010. 44% of the citywide weed control using non-chemical pest management alternatives was performed by parks in 2010. And I imagine that's with a lot less labor than some other departments had. So I thought that was pretty interesting. At least that's what I'm getting out of the numbers that I saw when I looked at them a different way. 39% of total tracked hours for all alternative pest management practices in 2010 were performed by the Parks Department, and 28% of the citywide hand weeding was performed by the Parks Department. And I suspect that percentage would be larger, but for the airport hours with the native habitat restoration going on. So I thought those were pretty eye-opening numbers when I looked at this, and I have to commend the department. I mean, it's amazing how great our parks look with the limited resources that we've had over the last 2 years. So, and just some other things. 95% of wood chips applied in 2010 in the city were applied by Parks and Golf. 100% of biosolids, Parks and Golf, and 95% of total mulch applied in 2010 was by Parks and Golf. So that's things going in I think some amazing directions here. On page 8 of the report, I thought the crux of the issue was explained well. We have reduced budgets, we have reduced staff levels that are real challenges, and financial constraints will either require changes in service levels and aesthetic expectations, or 2, more reliance on traditional pesticides must be employed. And with the 26% reduction in the workforce that Parks has had, I think this is a valid something to look at when we're coming into this budget period, because do we want to change the service levels and the aesthetics of our parks because we have reduced, we just, there's, with all the rain we've had, it's just going to be worse next year. Or do we want to look at perhaps some modifications to the program that could be considered to reduce labor but not have major ramifications on the intent of the IPM program? And or do we simply reduce our expectations of what our parks look like, and our open space, and our civic spaces, and our parkways? And I think these are all valid questions for the budget discussion. And I guess if it's possible, I'm wondering, could we allow the use of more effective and labor-saving pesticides in certain parks or parks areas? I guess this is something that I think is worthy of discussion. And if council is agreeable to ease certain measures within the program, if that even happens in this budget cycle discussion, does it get revisited on an annual basis as the economy improves and the ability to hire workforce becomes a reality? So I'm wondering, are there some ideas on modifications to the IPM program from staff that possibly could be discussed in the budget discussions. That's the $100,000 question.
Chair Wiscombe, regarding your last comment, we could go through and review that and provide you some information when we meet at our next budget meetings and discuss it further.
Okay,
And break it-
does the
we
commission
break it
feel
down.
that's a worthy direction?
I think it is those are important questions we ask ourselves, and I think they affect more than the Parks Department.
Right.
They are across the board in council. But I also have to say, having been on the commission when IPM was adopted, it is also a community question.
Yes.
So we are not, we don't operate without that input also. So it's one where I would tread somewhat slowly and realize that, we will be taking public input. Also, we have to look wider than our service standards to some of the things that Mr. Farrar brought up about, long-range effects and different things like that, making sure that we're not working at cross purposes with such things as our Creeks Advisory Committee. Where it's almost comes as a whole package as a community question. So I'm not sure this budget cycle, I personally would rather employ more people. I think it solves a number of other issues also. And, when we heard this before, what we heard was standards could go down. Now, I don't know if that's across the board community-wide at this point. When there are other sectors of the community, the hospitality industry might not be willing to have that. So it's a big conversation to me.
I agree. I agree with you, Ms. Longstreet. I'm not implying sweeping changes. I feel that, with all the rain we have, we're going to have more mosquitoes. We're going to have more weeds. It would be, I just think it would be nice to take a look at this if we think we can do it at this point in time. Yes, Mr. Burns?
I just comment that I agree we should have the discussion and possibly at a community-wide basis just to see where the general public's coming from. I do know we've always been asking for volunteers to step up. This may be a time to get the volunteers to actually, more of them to step up.
That's a very good point, and maybe that's where this leads. But I think looking at changes in aesthetics versus reliance on more traditional pesticides, or perhaps upping volunteers to do that. I think that's another very good point.
I'm not trying to poo-poo anything, but this has been in place quite a number of years with a volunteer component, and I don't think we better hold our breath to have that be our out. I'm sorry, it just isn't working. So I think we have to be realistic on that one. I would love it, and if the public wants to come forward and do it, that's great. But we talk about it as if it's, if it hasn't happened in 8 years or whatever, I just don't see it coming to be our savior. So I think it is interesting to look at what the options are. And to get the input and maybe have that discussion with our IPM committee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's clearly part of the involvement. Yes, Ms. Zachary.
Chair Wiscombe and members of the Commission, we can do a number of things. I think you have in your comments framed some of the issues that would be part of a discussion. We could bring back to you that framework and all the different considerations that might be made, the pros, the cons, the benefits, the challenges. I think one of the things we would propose in a discussion about our park system is where are we going for the next 10 years versus what's just happening next year. We have, as a park system, evolved dramatically since we were established, and our goals and objectives, depending on our park and the location of the park, have changed as well. So it might be in a larger context as we perhaps move away in our neighborhood parks from some of the more horticultural effect to really just providing recreation for people, and then really focusing on what are the gems we want to preserve, and why do we want to preserve those gems because of the value they provide to the community from a horticultural standpoint. So there's many layers of this discussion that could possibly take far longer to address than a few budget meetings, and certainly we would pursue that discussion on a broader scale with the Commission, with other interested parties, certainly IPM Advisory Committee, environmental considerations. Once you start stacking those all together, it does become fairly complex. At the same time, we are sensitive to the Commission's desire to see our parks look as good as they can given the resources that we have, and so we do struggle with that on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I don't. The last thing that I think we should do at this point is overburden staff with, but I think it's a worthy door to open, even albeit slowly. Maybe not part of the budget, but maybe, slowly opening it. No.
If I could just add, if you don't mind, Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, in this annual report, we really focus on what's been applied, and we don't step back and take a bigger picture of how does our park system different, or how are other facilities different, and perhaps we could spend some time doing that as well to give you a sense of what's still being carried on in our park system, despite the fact that we don't have the same tools that we had 10 years ago.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Zachary. Do I hear I think we're done with discussion. Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the report with comments and forward it to the City Council, and that we express our appreciation for all the staff input in this and all the hard work for every staff member that implements this program.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Chair Wiscombe?
Yes.
Staff would like to propose that we bring item number 6 back to the Commission at the April meeting. And very briefly, on item number 7, my intent was to share the upcoming dates with you on the budget review for fiscal year 12 and 13. And we've already sent notices out to the Commission for the 2 proposed special meetings, one a budget work session, and then a second for the meeting where the Parks and Recreation Commission would develop their recommendations. So it was strictly for information.
Okay, so we have a special work session on Wednesday, April 20th. Is that correct? That's
correct.
Yes, and then regular meeting on April 27th.
I can, if you would like.
Yeah, well, it's all right. I think the last one then is special meeting on Wednesday, May 18th.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So those are the 3 that involve the Commission with respect to the budget.
Yes, and then just for public purposes, the Parks and Recreation Department will present their budget to City Council on Monday evening, May 9th.
Right.
And then on Tuesday, May 24th, will be before the Finance Committee to review revenues, general fund revenues, and the golf course revenues. And we're off.
Okay, and
It starts again.
what time is that on Tuesday, May 24th?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I have an update to your list. 11:30 to 2 p.m.
And the venue?
Oh, wait. I'm giving you the wrong date. I'm sorry. We will be before the Finance Committee to review our revenues on Tuesday, May 3rd at noon in the Gebhardt Room. So I'm
Okay.
sorry. That was the one that you didn't have.
Okay, great. Okay, so the two, I guess, critical dates away from our commission meetings are Tuesday, May 3rd, 12 noon, Gebhardt Room with the Finance Committee, and Monday, May 9th at 6 p.m. with City Council special work session. Okay, that's great. Good. So we've, I think
Everyone's leaving.
we're adjourned. Thank you very
So moved.
much.